It was a chilly morning in New York City, and the United Nations headquarters buzzed with activity. Inside the large conference hall, diplomats from all over the world were gathering for an important meeting. The room was filled with low murmurs as people exchanged greetings or discussed their agendas for the day. Among them stood Karoline Leavitt, a young but determined congresswoman from the United States. She wore a navy blue suit that gave her an air of authority, though her eyes betrayed a hint of nervousness. Karoline had been chosen to represent her country at this session because of her reputation for being outspoken and bold. Her speeches, back home, often made headlines, earning her both praise and criticism. Today, however, she wasn't here to make headlines. She was here to listen and learn. At least that's what she told herself as she took her seat among the other delegates. The meeting began with opening remarks from various representatives, each speaking about their nation's goals and concerns. Most of the speeches were predictable, filled with diplomatic language and vague promises. But then came Hiroshi Tanaka, the Japanese representative. He stepped up to the podium, his posture confident and his voice calm, but firm. As he started talking, Karoline leaned forward slightly, curious to hear what he had to say. Tanaka began by discussing global cooperation and the importance of working together to solve problems like climate change and economic inequality. So far, so good, Karoline thought. These were topics everyone could agree on. But then, his tone shifted ever so slightly. Without naming anyone directly, he mentioned how some countries had recently adopted policies that seemed unpredictable and self-serving. Leadership, he said, pausing for effect, requires consistency and foresight. It cannot be based on short-term gains or personal ambitions. Karoline felt her stomach tighten. Though Tanaka didn't explicitly mention Donald Trump, it was clear whom he was referring to. Trump's presidency had been marked by controversial decisions and a style of leadership that many found polarizing. Even now, years after he left office, his legacy continued to spark heated debates around the world. And here was Tanaka, criticizing it right in front of her and everyone else. Her mind raced as she tried to process what she'd just heard. Was this fair? Should she respond? Or should she let it slide and focus on more pressing issues? She glanced at the other members of the U.S. delegation sitting nearby. Laura Bennett, a seasoned diplomat known for her cool demeanor, avoided eye contact. Daniel Carter, Karoline's trusted advisor, raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Clearly, they weren't going to jump in and defend their former president. As the session moved on, Karoline found it hard to concentrate. Every word Tanaka had spoken echoed in her head. While she didn't always agree with Trump's policies, she couldn't ignore the fact that his administration had achieved certain successes. More importantly, she believed that no one, not even a foreign diplomat, had the right to criticize her country so openly. It felt disrespectful not just to Trump but to America itself. When the meeting finally ended, Karoline lingered in the hall, watching as delegates mingled and chatted casually. Some approached Tanaka to congratulate him on his speech, while others whispered amongst themselves. Karoline caught snippets of their conversations. "Did you hear what he said?" one person asked. "Bold move," another replied. The consensus seemed to be that Tanaka had scored a victory of sorts, making the U.S. look weak by comparison. Feeling a mix of anger and determination, Karoline decided to take action. Back in her hotel room later that evening, she sat at the small desk, staring at a blank sheet of paper. She knew she needed to craft a response, a rebuttal that would not only address Tanaka's comments, but also remind everyone of America's strengths. But where should she start? She began by jotting down key points. First, she wanted to acknowledge the value of constructive criticism. Diplomacy thrived on open dialogue, after all. Then, she planned to highlight specific achievements of American leadership, particularly during challenging times. Finally, she intended to emphasize the importance of unity and collaboration rather than division. Writing helped calm her nerves, but it also brought clarity. Karoline realized that this wasn't just about defending Trump or proving Tanaka wrong. It was about standing up for her country when it mattered most. She imagined herself back in the conference hall, facing hundreds of people from different nations, cultures, and backgrounds. What would she say to inspire confidence in America's role on the global stage? Hours passed as she worked tirelessly, revising sentences and rearranging paragraphs until everything flowed smoothly. By midnight, her speech was nearly complete. Exhausted but satisfied, Karoline read it aloud one last time. Her voice grew stronger with each line, filling the quiet room with conviction. "You can criticize our methods," she wrote near the end, "but you cannot deny our impact. We are a nation built on resilience, innovation, and courage, and we will continue to lead, not out of arrogance, but out of responsibility." With the speech tucked safely into her bag, Karoline turned off the light and climbed into bed. Sleep didn't come easily. Her mind kept replaying the events of the day. Tomorrow would be a big moment for her country, and perhaps for diplomacy itself. But as she lay there in the dark, she felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened next, she was ready. This concludes Part 1 of the story. Let me know if you'd like to proceed with subsequent parts. The next morning, Karoline woke up early. The city outside her hotel window was already alive with the sounds of traffic and people rushing to their destinations. She stretched and sat up in bed, her mind immediately returning to the speech she had written the night before. It felt like a heavy weight resting on her shoulders. She knew that delivering it would be risky. Some might applaud her courage, while others could see her response as unnecessarily confrontational. After getting dressed, she met Daniel Carter for breakfast in the hotel's small dining room. Daniel was older than Karoline, with graying hair and glasses that made him look more like a professor than an advisor. He always carried a notebook with him, jotting down thoughts or reminders. Today, however, he seemed unusually quiet. As they sat down at a corner table, he glanced at her with concern. "You've been thinking about Tanaka's comments all night, haven't you?" Daniel asked gently. Karoline nodded, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I can't just let them slide," she said firmly. "He criticized us, not just Trump, but our entire country in front of the whole world. That's not okay." Daniel sighed. "I understand why you feel that way, but you need to think carefully about how you respond. Diplomacy is a delicate game. If you come across as too aggressive, it might backfire." Karoline frowned. She appreciated Daniel's advice. He often helped her stay grounded, but this time she wasn't sure she agreed with him. "What do you suggest I do then? Pretend I didn't hear what he said? Let him get away with it?" "No," Daniel replied quickly. "But there are different ways to handle this. You don't have to confront him directly. Sometimes subtlety works better than a full-on attack." Before Karoline could respond, Laura Bennett joined them. Laura was tall and elegant, with sharp features and an air of confidence. Unlike Karoline, who wore her emotions openly, Laura kept hers hidden behind a polite smile. She set her tray down on the table and took a seat. "I heard you're planning to say something today," Laura said, looking at Karoline. Her tone was neutral, but there was a hint of disapproval in her eyes. "Yes, I am," Karoline said, meeting her gaze. "I'm not going to let his remarks go unanswered." Laura raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure that's wise? Escalating tensions won't help anyone. We're here to build bridges, not burn them." Karoline felt frustration bubbling inside her. Why did everyone assume she wanted to start a fight? "I'm not trying to escalate anything," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I'm defending my country, there's a difference." Laura shrugged, clearly unconvinced. "Just be careful. Words matter, especially in places like this. Once they're out, you can't take them back." The conversation ended there, leaving Karoline feeling uneasy. As much as she respected Laura's experience, she couldn't shake the feeling that backing down would make her look weak. She needed to stand her ground, even if it meant facing criticism later. After breakfast, Karoline decided to rehearse her speech. She found an empty conference room and stood at the front practicing her delivery. At first, her voice wavered, unsure and hesitant, but as she repeated the lines over and over, she grew more confident. By the time she finished, she felt like she had nailed it, or at least close enough to make an impact. Later that afternoon, she attended another session at the UN headquarters. This one was less formal, allowing delegates to mingle and discuss issues informally. Karoline spotted Tanaka standing near a group of diplomats, laughing and chatting casually. For a moment, she considered approaching him, but something held her back. Instead, she listened intently as he spoke. "He makes valid points," one delegate remarked, referring to Tanaka's earlier speech. "America has made mistakes, hasn't it?" Karoline clenched her fists under the table. Hearing these words stung more than she expected. She wanted to jump in and defend her country, but she forced herself to stay silent. Now wasn't the time. As the day wore on, she noticed subtle changes in how people treated her. Some avoided eye contact altogether, while others gave her sympathetic smiles. A few even congratulated her for having the guts to speak up. One such person was Rachel Kim, a Korean diplomat known for her diplomatic skills. Rachel approached Karoline during a break, offering kind words. "I admire your passion," Rachel said softly. "It takes courage to stand up for what you believe in." "Thank you," Karoline replied, surprised by the compliment. "But not everyone feels the same way." Rachel nodded knowingly. "True, not everyone will agree with you. But remember, diplomacy isn't about winning arguments. It's about finding common ground." Her words lingered in Karoline's mind, long after they parted ways. Was Rachel right? Had she misunderstood the purpose of diplomacy? Karoline wrestled with these questions as she returned to her hotel room that evening. Back in her room, she reviewed her speech once more, making minor adjustments. Each word felt heavier now, burdened by the expectations of those around her. She thought about Daniel's caution, Laura's skepticism, and Rachel's wisdom. What was the right thing to do? Finally, she set the speech aside and stared out the window. The city lights twinkled below, reminding her of how vast and complicated the world truly was. Tomorrow she would step onto the stage and deliver her rebuttal. Whether it succeeded or failed, she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't stay silent. Her country deserved better than that. With a deep breath, Karoline turned off the light and climbed into bed. Sleep came slowly, interrupted by dreams of crowded rooms and echoing voices. In each dream, she stood alone, speaking words that no one seemed to hear. Yet through it all, she refused to stop talking. Because deep down, she believed that standing up, even imperfectly, was better than staying silent. The morning of the speech arrived and Karoline woke up earlier than usual. She opened the curtains in her hotel room to let in the sunlight, but the brightness did little to calm her nerves. Today was the day she had been preparing for, or dreading, depending on how she looked at it. Her stomach felt tight, like a knot that refused to loosen no matter how hard she tried. After getting dressed, she took a few moments to sit quietly and gather her thoughts. She went over her speech in her head, repeating key phrases to herself. "Leadership requires vision," she whispered under her breath, "but it also demands respect." These words gave her strength, reminding her why she had decided to speak out in the first place. When she arrived at the UN headquarters, the atmosphere was different from the previous days. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with anticipation, as if everyone knew something big was about to happen. Delegates filed in slowly, taking their seats and exchanging hushed conversations. Some glanced toward Karoline, whispering behind cupped hands. She could feel their eyes on her, weighing her every move. Daniel Carter met her near the entrance, carrying his ever-present notebook. He gave her an encouraging smile, though his expression betrayed a hint of worry. "You've got this," he said softly. "Just remember to breathe." Karoline nodded, grateful for his support. "Thanks, Daniel. I'll do my best." As she made her way to her seat, she noticed Laura Bennett sitting nearby. Laura offered a small nod, her face unreadable. Whether it was meant as encouragement or caution, Karoline couldn't tell. Either way, it didn't matter now. The moment she had been waiting for and dreading was almost here. The session began with routine business. Several delegates delivered speeches about global issues, ranging from climate change to economic recovery. Karoline listened politely, though her mind kept drifting back to her own turn at the podium. Finally, the moderator announced that it was time for the United States to address the assembly. Her heart pounded as she stood up and walked to the front of the room. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though gravity itself was trying to hold her back. When she reached the podium, she paused for a moment, gripping its edges tightly. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on her. For a brief second, she wondered if she could really go through with this. But then she remembered why she was there, not just for herself, but for her country. "Thank you, Mr. Moderator," she began, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, I stand before you today not to dwell on past disagreements, but to reflect on the values that unite us as nations." She scanned the room, making eye contact with a few familiar faces. Hiroshi Tanaka sat near the front, his expression unreadable. Karoline took a deep breath and continued. "In recent days, we have heard criticisms of American leadership. While constructive feedback is essential to growth, it is equally important to recognize the contributions and sacrifices our nation has made on the global stage. We are far from perfect, but we strive daily to uphold principles of freedom, innovation, and resilience." Her words hung in the air, drawing nods from some delegates while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. She pressed on, her tone growing firmer. "Let me be clear. Leadership is not without challenges. It requires difficult decisions, sometimes unpopular ones. But it also demands respect for the people who make those choices and for the countries they represent. To dismiss an entire nation's efforts based on selective interpretations is neither fair nor productive." Karoline paused again, letting her words sink in. She could see Tanaka watching her closely, his arms crossed over his chest. She resisted the urge to look away, holding his gaze instead. "We must focus less on pointing fingers and more on working together. Global problems require global solutions. If we spend our time criticizing each other rather than collaborating, we risk losing sight of what truly matters: the well-being of our people and our planet." By the time she finished speaking, the room was completely silent. For a moment, Karoline worried that she had gone too far, or not far enough. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the audience. It started with a few claps, hesitant and scattered, but soon grew louder and more unified. Delegates rose to their feet, showing their appreciation. Karoline stepped back from the podium, her heart still racing. She hadn't expected such a reaction. As she returned to her seat, Daniel gave her a thumbs up, his face breaking into a proud grin. Laura, too, offered a subtle smile, though she remained seated. Even Tanaka joined in the applause, though his expression remained neutral. Backstage. After the session, Karoline found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Some praised her eloquence, while others simply thanked her for addressing the elephant in the room. Rachel Kim approached her once again, this time with genuine admiration in her eyes. "That was impressive," Rachel said warmly. "You struck the perfect balance between assertiveness and diplomacy." "Thank you," Karoline replied, feeling a mix of relief and pride. "I wasn't sure how it would land." "It landed well," Rachel assured her, "though I suspect not everyone will agree." Karoline nodded, knowing Rachel was right. Not everyone would see her speech as a triumph. Back home, opinions would likely be divided, with some applauding her boldness and others accusing her of stirring unnecessary conflict. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the moment. She had done what she set out to do: defend her country with dignity and grace. Later that evening, Karoline returned to her hotel room, exhausted but exhilarated. She replayed the events of the day in her mind, analyzing every detail. Had she said enough? Too much? Would her words have any lasting impact, or would they fade into obscurity like so many others? As she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she realized that none of those questions truly mattered. What mattered was that she had spoken her truth, standing firm when it counted most. Whatever came next, she knew she had given it her all, and for now that was enough. The final day of the United Nations conference arrived, and Karoline felt a mix of emotions as she prepared for the closing ceremony. The past week had been a whirlwind of speeches, debates, and private conversations. She had faced criticism, earned admiration, and learned more about diplomacy than she ever expected. Now, as delegates gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall one last time, she couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed, not just in the room, but within herself. The atmosphere was lighter today, almost celebratory. After days of intense discussions, everyone seemed eager to end on a positive note. Delegates exchanged handshakes and laughter, their earlier tensions softened by shared meals and late-night negotiations. Karoline noticed Hiroshi Tanaka standing near a group of colleagues, smiling as he listened to someone tell a story. It was strange to see him so relaxed after their public clash, but it reminded her that people were more than their words or disagreements. As the ceremony began, representatives from various countries took turns delivering short remarks. Most focused on gratitude and collaboration, emphasizing the importance of working together despite differences. When it came time for the U.S. delegation to speak, Laura Bennett stepped up to the podium. Her speech was polished and diplomatic, thanking everyone for their efforts and expressing hope for future partnerships. Karoline watched quietly from her seat, feeling a flicker of pride in her colleagues' ability to unite rather than divide. After the formal speeches ended, the event transitioned into a reception. Soft music played in the background as delegates mingled over drinks and hors d'oeuvres. Karoline found herself moving through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with familiar faces. Some congratulated her again on her earlier speech, while others simply nodded politely. She tried to stay present, enjoying the moment, but part of her mind kept drifting back to the challenges ahead. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted Hiroshi Tanaka heading toward her. For a brief second, she froze, unsure what to expect. But when he stopped in front of her, his expression was calm and respectful. "Congresswoman Leavitt," he said with a slight bow, "I wanted to acknowledge your response the other day. It was impressive." Karoline blinked, caught off guard by his words. "Thank you," she replied cautiously. "I appreciate that." Tanaka gave a small smile. "Diplomacy is never easy, especially when emotions run high. But I believe we both share the same goal, to improve our world. Perhaps we can find ways to work together moving forward." His tone was sincere, and Karoline felt a wave of relief wash over her. This wasn't an apology, nor did it need to be. It was an olive branch, a gesture of mutual respect. She returned his smile. "I'd like that," she said. "We may not always agree, but finding common ground is what matters most." They shook hands briefly before Tanaka excused himself to join another conversation. Karoline stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the exchange settle. In that simple interaction, she saw a path forward, not just for herself but for all nations navigating complex relationships. Later, Rachel Kim approached her once more. Rachel held 2 glasses of sparkling water and handed one to Karoline. "You've come a long way this week," she said warmly. "I'm proud of how you handled everything." Karoline chuckled softly. "It hasn't been easy. I've made mistakes and I'll probably make more. But I'm learning." "That's all anyone can ask for," Rachel replied. "Growth doesn't happen overnight. What matters is that you're willing to adapt and listen. That's what makes a true leader." Karoline nodded, feeling a sense of validation. Over the course of the week, she had gone from feeling defensive and uncertain to embracing the complexities of diplomacy. She realized now that leadership wasn't about always having the right answers. It was about being open to new perspectives and striving to do better. As the evening wore on, Karoline found Daniel Carter standing alone near a window. He looked deep in thought, gazing out at the city lights. She joined him, holding her glass of water. "You've done good work here," Daniel said without looking at her. "Not perfect, but good." "I'll take that as a compliment," Karoline joked lightly. Then, after a pause, she added, "Do you think I made a difference?" Daniel turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "Yes, I do. Not because you changed the world in a week, but because you showed people that standing up for your beliefs doesn't mean shutting others out. You balanced passion with humility, and that's something they won't forget." His words stayed with her as the night drew to a close. By the time she returned to her hotel room, she felt a profound sense of clarity. The week had tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated, forcing her to confront her own biases and limitations. Yet it had also shown her the power of resilience and the importance of connection. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Karoline pulled out her notebook and began writing. She jotted down lessons she had learned about diplomacy, about leadership, and about herself. Words like patience, adaptability, and empathy filled the page. These weren't just ideas, they were promises to carry forward. When she finally climbed under the covers, her mind was quieter than it had been in days. The doubts and fears that had plagued her early in the week had faded, replaced by a quiet confidence. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more speeches, more debates, and more moments of uncertainty. But she also knew she had grown stronger and wiser because of them. As she drifted off to sleep, one thought lingered in her mind. Diplomacy wasn't about winning or losing. It was about building bridges even when the waters below were rough. And though she couldn't control every outcome, she could choose how she responded. With courage, with kindness, and with hope. The next morning, Karoline packed her bags and prepared to leave the hotel. As she stepped outside, the crisp autumn air greeted her, carrying the promise of new beginnings. She took a deep breath, savoring the moment. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, not just as a representative of her country, but as someone who believed in the possibility of a better world. The morning after Karoline's speech, the world seemed to wake up buzzing with reactions. News outlets around the globe covered her rebuttal extensively, dissecting every word she had said. Some praised her for defending her country with grace and intelligence, while others criticized her for being confrontational and stirring unnecessary tension. Back in the United States, opinions were just as divided. Supporters hailed her as a hero who stood up for American pride, while detractors accused her of prioritizing spectacle over diplomacy. Karoline woke up late that morning, exhausted from the emotional toll of the previous day. She reached for her phone on the bedside table and scrolled through the headlines. The comments ranged from glowing admiration to harsh criticism. One article called her a beacon of strength, while another labeled her reckless and divisive. Reading them all made her head spin. She put the phone down and sighed deeply, feeling the weight of public opinion pressing down on her. When she arrived at the UN headquarters later that morning, the atmosphere was different. People greeted her with a mix of curiosity and caution. Some delegates avoided eye contact altogether, clearly unsure how to approach her after her fiery speech. Others gave her polite nods or quick smiles, but there was an underlying tension in the air. It was as if everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Laura Bennett cornered her during a coffee break. Laura's usual calm demeanor was replaced by a look of concern. "You've stirred up quite a storm," she said bluntly. "Are you ready for the fallout?" "I didn't do this to create chaos," Karoline replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I did it because I believe in standing up for what's right." Laura crossed her arms. "I understand your intentions, but diplomacy isn't about being right. It's about finding solutions. You might have won some applause yesterday, but you also created new challenges." Karoline felt frustration bubbling inside her. Why couldn't anyone see that she wasn't trying to cause trouble? She had simply wanted to defend her country's honor. "What would you have done?" she asked, her tone sharper than she intended. "Just let Tanaka criticize us without saying a word?" Laura hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I wouldn't have stayed silent, but I might have chosen a different way to respond. A quieter approach, maybe. Sometimes subtlety is more effective than confrontation." Karoline opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself. Deep down, she knew Laura had a point. Her speech had been bold, even provocative, and now she had to deal with the consequences. Still, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Standing up for her beliefs felt like the right thing to do, even if it came at a cost. Later that afternoon, Karoline attended a small working group meeting focused on climate change initiatives. As she entered the room, she noticed Hiroshi Tanaka sitting at the far end of the table. He glanced up briefly when she walked in but quickly returned his attention to the papers in front of him. For a moment, Karoline considered approaching him, perhaps to clear the air or at least acknowledge their shared responsibility to work together. But before she could act, the meeting began, and the opportunity passed. Throughout the session, Tanaka remained quiet, letting others take the lead. When he did speak, his words were measured and professional, offering practical suggestions rather than grand statements. Karoline found herself impressed despite herself. Whatever his views on American leadership, he was clearly committed to solving global problems. Maybe they weren't so different after all. After the meeting ended, Rachel Kim approached Karoline again. This time her expression was more serious. "Can we talk privately?" she asked quietly. "Of course," Karoline replied, curious about what Rachel wanted to say. They stepped into a nearby corridor where they could speak without interruptions. Rachel folded her arms and looked at Karoline thoughtfully. "Your speech yesterday was powerful," she began, "but it has caused some ripples. Some delegates feel uneasy about the direction things are heading." "What do you mean?" Karoline asked, frowning. "Are people upset with me?" Rachel hesitated. "Not exactly. They're concerned that tensions between nations could escalate if we focus too much on disagreements instead of collaboration. Diplomacy thrives on trust, and trust takes time to build." Karoline nodded slowly, understanding what Rachel was saying. By responding to Tanaka's criticisms so directly, she may have unintentionally damaged some of that trust. "I didn't mean to make things worse," she admitted. "I just wanted to defend my country." "I know," Rachel said gently. "And I respect that. But sometimes defending your position can come across as aggression, even if that's not your intention. It's important to find ways to repair any damage before it grows." Karoline thought about Rachel's words long after their conversation ended. She realized that her actions, no matter how well-intentioned, had real-world consequences. If she wanted to be an effective leader, she needed to consider not only what she said, but also how it was perceived. That realization weighed heavily on her as she prepared for the rest of the day. That evening, Karoline met with Daniel Carter in her hotel room. He had spent the day monitoring media coverage and gathering feedback from other delegates. "It's mixed," he told her as he sat down on the edge of a chair. "Some people think you handled it perfectly, others, not so much." Karoline sighed. "I figured as much." Daniel leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Listen, Karoline, you did something brave. And yes, it came with risks, but bravery often does. What matters now is how you move forward. You can't undo what's been said, but you can shape what happens next." She looked at him, grateful for his unwavering support. "How do I do that?" "By showing that you're willing to listen and collaborate," Daniel replied. "Actions speak louder than words. If you focus on building bridges instead of walls, people will remember that more than any single speech." His advice resonated with her. Over the next few days, Karoline made a conscious effort to engage more openly with other delegates. She sought out opportunities to contribute to discussions, offering ideas and compromises rather than arguments. She even managed to exchange a few polite words with Tanaka during a lunch break, thanking him for his insights on a recent proposal. Though their interaction was brief, it marked a small step toward mending fences. As the week drew to a close, Karoline reflected on everything that had happened. She had come to New York determined to represent her country with pride, but she had learned that diplomacy required more than passion. It demanded patience, humility, and a willingness to adapt. While she still believed in standing up for what was right, she now understood that true leadership meant knowing when to fight and when to listen. On her final night in the city, Karoline stood on the balcony of her hotel room, gazing out at the glittering skyline. The lights stretched endlessly in every direction, a reminder of how vast and interconnected the world truly was. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, not because she had all the answers, but because she had grown. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she was ready to face them.